The New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by William K. Stewart and F. E. Patzak, based on the characters created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Episode 9, Sherlock Holmes and the Christmas Spirit, narrated by David McCran. It was the third Sunday of Advent, 1883. Holmes and I were reminiscing about last year's Christmas when a well-heeled elderly gentleman knocked at our door on Baker Street, seeking help. His name was Jacob Marley, a local businessman who operated a counting house with his partner in the City of London. By his appearance, they seemed to be making good profits. Sitting across from us, Marley exuded cold-heartedness and emotional frigidity, not uncommon traits for a usurer. I must admit, I encountered our new client with a certain degree of prejudice. And so I was not surprised to learn that Marley came to us regarding a threatening letter. An anonymous blackmailer demanded a significant sum of money in exchange for the release of the hostages. "The blackmailer has taken hostages?" Holmes asked, surprised. "In a case like this, in which people are in imminent physical danger, you should definitely consult the police." "I've been there," Marley answered, annoyed. "But I get the feeling Scotland Yard isn't taking the case seriously enough. These people aren't concerned for my safety." "To be clear," Holmes remarked, "I was referring to the safety of the hostages. Who are they? Relatives? Friends?" "Nonsense," Marley growled. "They're Mars and Mercury." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "And who are they, if I may ask?" "My Great Danes!" Marley cried. "My property!" I had to suppress the amusement from showing on my face. Someone kidnapped the man's giant thoroughbred German dogs, named after ancient Roman gods. Such grotesquerie only exists in criminology. Holmes was not stirred and calmly remarked, "I see. I assume the ransom exceeds the value of the animals." "It does," answered Marley. "But Mars and Mercury are my closest confidants. They are invaluable to me." It was difficult to imagine this man feeling genuine affection for other living beings. Then he said, "It would be a most regretful loss, but I could never get over losing my hard-earned money." "So you are not willing to accept the terms?" Holmes inquired. "By no means," Marley cried. "The chap won't get a single penny out of me." Holmes thought about it for a moment. "Well then," he finally said, "we must put a stop to the blackmailer's game. May I see the letter, Mr. Marley?" Our client handed Holmes the single-paged letter. He scanned it before passing it to me. It read the following: "Esteemed Mr. Marley, I have freed Mars and Mercury and placed them in my care. They won't be returned unless you commit to treating them better and pay the penalty of £10,000 sterling within 1 week. Details will follow. Sincerely, the Christmas Spirit." "The Christmas Spirit?" I repeated. "What's that about?" "It's nonsense," Marley grumbled. "I want my dogs, and I want to keep my money. Could you help me, gentlemen?" Holmes did not need to consider it long. "Certainly, Mr. Marley," he answered. "But you must know, our services don't exactly come cheap." Marley's face soured. "Cost it what it may," he said. "I want to catch this criminal and nail him to the cross." "That seems a trifle extreme," I remarked. Holmes smiled at me. "I am sure Mr. Marley meant it in the figurative sense. He certainly does not intend to spoil the peace of Christmas with an actual crucifixion." "Humbug!" Marley growled. "I can do without all this Christmas nonsense, but not without my money." "You've already made that abundantly clear," Holmes pronounced. "Then I trust you will heed my wishes," Marley said, and gave me a suspicious look. "So, what next?" Holmes stood up from his chair. "We have no further questions for today," he said. "Tomorrow we will meet you at your office. In the meantime, I will perform a criminological examination of the letter." Marley also got up and reached out his hand to Holmes. "If you must, Mr. Holmes," he said, "I'll be there from 7:30 on. I hope you're worth the price." With these words, and a silent nod in my direction, Mr. Marley left us. Once we were alone again, Holmes asked, "Now, Watson, what did you notice about the threatening letter?" I took another glance at the letter. There is nothing special about the letter itself. It is written on plain, unadorned paper with regular black ink. Nothing about it reads as being very expensive. "And the handwriting," Holmes continued. I looked at the letter again. "Rounded and sweeping," I attested. "Quite elegant. There are, however, 2 spelling errors that somewhat dampen the overall impression." "That's right," Holmes confirmed. "We're looking for a poorly educated blackmailer with a penchant for beauty. On the outside, the letter is polite. Its content, though, is very direct and imperious. What's more, the blackmailer, who claims to be concerned about the welfare of Marley's dogs, addresses them by their names." It was immediately clear to me what Holmes was getting at. "That means," I quickly added, "that the perpetrator is no stranger, but somehow connected to Marley. He knows about him." "It has to be so," Holmes confirmed. "At the same time, I doubt that the dog's welfare is really at the heart of the matter. With this much money at stake, they are at best a means to an end, or simply a red herring. I don't believe we are looking for an animal rights activist, but indeed someone with a personal financial interest in the matter." I acknowledged Holmes's observations with an audible sigh. "That means we're looking for a needle in a haystack," I said. "As a loan provider, Marley must have bankrupted hundreds of people, all of which have a motive and could be suspects. We must narrow the search." Holmes thought about what I had said, tapping his chin. Then he turned to me and wondered. "The blackmailer calls himself the Christmas Spirit. What's that all about?" "Perhaps it's just a joke," I mused hesitantly. Holmes shook his head. No, he said intently. "He calls himself that to express some sort of sentiment or even mission." "A religious fanatic, perhaps?" I suggested. Again Holmes refuted. "If that were the case, he would have undoubtedly referred to the Lord directly," he determined. "But Christmas, what do we associate with it? The Messiah's birth?" I blurted out. Holmes did not think long before continuing. "Jesus' birth has begun to take a back seat lately. Christmas is becoming increasingly profane and commercialized. More victuals are served than can be consumed. Each year more and more gifts appear under the tree, more than anyone needs. And each year they need to become increasingly expensive. Quantity over quality. The celebration is beginning to stand for consumerism and commercialism, for prosperity and possessions, and the public display thereof." "That may be the case for the more affluent members of society," I interjected, almost in passing. "For the many poor inhabitants of London, Christmas is also a time of hardship." Holmes's pointer finger shot into the air. "That's it!" he cried. "Excellent, Watson! It's the discrepancy the spirit is concerned about. Doesn't the letter say he would fine Marley? Not for his dogs, of course, but for his excessive wealth. It's about rebalancing the scale. That may be the case, I countered. But before we go looking for a Yuletide Robin Hood, we should remember that we're dealing with abduction and blackmail. Don't get me wrong, I harbour little sympathy for Mr. Marley's exploitative business practices, but we've made a commitment to our client. Certainly, answered Holmes. I'm merely trying to piece together a criminal profile. And as I see it, the perpetrator, the spirit, would rather have Christmas stand for a more just society, charity, brotherly love, and generosity. Now, if that means he will redistribute the £10,000 for the common good, or gift it to himself as his own personal Boxing Day present, remains to be seen. The next morning we headed to Marley's office and arrived there shortly before 8 o'clock. Although it was located at a very noble London address, the interior was sparse and austere. There was no indication of Christmas being around the corner. Marley and his companion were clearly uninterested in pageantry, which made me wonder to what end the two men earned, saved, and accrued their riches. The aforementioned partner, a certain Mr. Scrooge, was on a business trip in Scotland, not expected to return until the following week. Marley was feeling the pressure of the mounting workload, especially since Mr. Cratchit, their only employee, did not come to work that day. "Some rotten work ethic," he grumbled. "That Cratchit is always prioritizing the wrong things, and to think I pay him 15 shillings a week." The salary would suggest that Cratchit was only working part-time, but of course that was not the case. "The chap reduces his hours whenever he can," Marley continued. "But I won't pay for each and every second he misses from his 60-hour work week." "Is Mr. Cratchit ill often?" I asked. "Nonsense," Marley snapped back. "He's in excellent shape. But his kids constantly come down with something, and then he has to look after them while his wife takes one of the brats to the doctor. If I were him, I'd have just spawned fewer of them." I took a deep breath in preparation to respond, but Holmes was quicker. "What kind of work does Mr. Cratchit do for you?" he inquired. "He is our secretary, clerk, bookkeeper," Marley explained. "A quite capable man with lots of potential, but his family is holding him back." "I see," said Holmes. "We will pay Mr. Cratchit a visit to question him after we are finished here." "Do you suspect him?" Marley wanted to know with a blank expression. Holmes shook his head. "At the moment," he answered, "we aren't suspecting anyone in particular, though it may help to take a look at your client list. Cratchit could provide us with it. Isn't that so?" "Certainly," Marley confirmed and handed Holmes a folder. "In anticipation of your request, I instructed Cratchit to spend the night collecting all documents pertaining to the past 6 months." "That is very forthcoming," Holmes said gratefully, and passed the papers to me. "Dr. Watson will study them and pick out any suspicious names." "Of course I will," I mumbled to myself. "We will also want to know whether Cratchit noticed something suspicious himself," Holmes continued. Marley furrowed his brow. "It's plausible to think that the perpetrator could be among our clients," he mused. "We are an upright, honest enterprise based on mutual trust and commitment, though we can't always avoid dealing with debtors, failures, and losers. In those cases, we have no other option but to collect on possessions that serve as securities or have the court impose prison sentences. Predicaments such as these have upset some of our clients in the past." Marley spoke straight from his heart of stone. His misanthropy sent chills down my spine. Once again, Holmes prevented me from giving the fine gentleman a piece of my mind. "Very well," he said, resting his hand on my shoulder to calm me. "We will investigate any leads that may arise while we wait for the blackmailer's next message. It may offer us some more clues and provide us with further instructions. Until then, Dr. Watson and I will pay Mr. Cratchit a visit at his home." We said goodbye to Marley and told him we would return later that morning. Then we made our way to Whitechapel, where the Cratchit family lived in poor conditions. At first, Cratchit believed we had been sent by Marley to check whether his absence from work was warranted. Apparently, this sort of thing happened on occasion. He calmed quickly once we convinced him that we were there for a different reason. "You're interested in that threatening letter that Marley received?" Cratchit asked, relieved. "And in the abducted dogs," Holmes added. "Those poor animals are better off anywhere but with Marley," Cratchit explained. "But as you can see, it is my family and I that, despite all the hard work, live a dog's life. But I am thankful I have a job." "Why work for Marley and Scrooge for a starvation wage?" Holmes wanted to know. "As a skilled and hard-working clerk, you must be able to find a job elsewhere." Cratchit laughed bitterly. "It's not that simple," he replied. "I'm indebted to my employer. Part of my salary goes to paying off a loan I took out several years ago to feed my family." "That is outrageous!" escaped my lips. "You mean to say that you're engaged in some sort of debt bondage? That is highly improper." Cratchit shook his head resignedly. "It's legal," he countered. "Besides, I have no other choice. It's the only way I can repay my debts while scraping by." I glanced round the small flat. Shabby furniture, mouldy walls. It appeared as though all three children slept in one room that doubled as the kitchen. The parents had a small adjacent chamber that was hardly large enough for their makeshift bed. An embroidery on the wall that read, "My home is my castle," with the last two letters mistakenly inverted, seemed ironic to me. And yet, amid the hardship, one could sense the great effort placed in creating a festive spirit. Mistletoes and firs adorned the flat. In one corner there even stood a twiggy Christmas tree decorated with straw angels, 2 glass balls, and 4 candles that appeared to have been reused. "Mr. Cratchit," Holmes began, "we do not wish to disturb you long. As you know, we are looking for Mr. Marley's blackmailer. That begs the question, does your employer have any enemies?" Cratchit burst out laughing. "He certainly doesn't have any friends," he answered. "Apart from Mr. Scrooge, of course. Moneymongers do not tend to be very popular. First their clients think they'll be saved by a loan, but then they discover they can't make the payments, and the debt just accrues. The inevitable consequences: loss of all possessions, complete ruin, occasionally homelessness, misery, illness, death. This is the usurer's business model. Mr. Marley has hundreds of foes in London, but it's unlikely that any of them would be in the position to come up with a blackmailing scheme." "So you suspect the perpetrator to come from some other corner?" I inquired. "To be honest," Cratchit explained, "I find it hard to think about it all. My youngest son is very ill. My wife is about to return from the doctor any minute now, and then we must think about how to pay for the medicine. I'm sorry, but you'll have to find the culprit yourself." "Naturally," Holmes said. "And we certainly will. I do not wish to burden you, Mr. Cratchit. We will leave you now. Please excuse the disturbance." "Quite all right," Cratchit reassured. "I'm sorry I couldn't be of much help." Holmes walked to the door, but stopped just short of it. He turned around and added, Please send our regards to Mrs. Cratchit. We wish your son a swift recovery, and you all a Merry Christmas despite your financial woes. By the way, does your wife also work? She used to be a seamstress in a small tailor shop, Cratchit answered. My wife learned how to sew in Southern Ireland, where she's from, but the tailor shop closed last year. Lately she has earned some extra money sitting Mr. Marley's dogs, but that's history now too. We're just out of luck. Holmes nodded compassionately. Be that as it may, I wish you all the best, he said as he opened the door. Dr. Watson, we must go. We still have lots to do. I followed Holmes's instruction and walked through the door above which hung a twiggy mistletoe. On the ride back to Marley's office, I was still filled with outrage. It's not right how Marley treats Cratchit, I declared. It's disgraceful and inhumane. We are at the tail end of the 19th century, after all, not the Middle Ages. Yes, replied Holmes, but you had said yourself that we must focus on the assignment and remain committed to our client. Or is that no longer the case? I took a moment to think. Perhaps my standpoint never was correct, I answered. Perhaps we should never have accepted the case. That would have been an option, Holmes remarked. But what would that have changed? Nothing. I had to concede after some brief consideration. But at least we wouldn't have become Marley's henchmen. Holmes shook his head. We are not that, he explained. We are merely trying to solve a criminal case as consulting detectives, which gives us ample space to exercise our personal morals. But to do so, my dear Watson, you must keep a cool head, stay focused. You struggled to do so this morning, causing you to miss some important clues. What clues? I asked, perplexed. Holmes smiled. You see, he said, just as I said. Our client had already been waiting for us impatiently when we arrived back at the office of Marley and Scrooge. The awaited second letter had arrived. "It's about time, gentlemen," Marley cried as we entered. "The blackmailer sent another letter. Here it is." He handed Holmes the letter, and we began to read it together. "Esteemed Mr. Marley," it read, "I hope you have secured the £10,000. The handoff will take place this afternoon. Put the money inside a jute sack and bring it to St. Mary Moorfields Church. There you will encounter a nativity scene beside the altar. Please deposit the money beneath the Christ child and leave the premises. No police. P.S. I heard you've contracted the help of Sherlock Holmes. Please let him know I wish him a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Signed, The Christmas Spirit." Holmes smiled. "The spirit is well informed," he concluded, "and quite polite." "Nonsense," Marley growled. "Your admiration for the blackmailer's manners aside, what do we do now?" Holmes pretended to carefully consider his next steps, when in fact he had long decided what to do. "We'll have to heed the call," he finally said. "Have you lost your mind?" Marley cried. "This is my money we're talking about, and my dogs." "Well now, Mr. Marley," Holmes began, "we don't exactly have any concrete leads, only speculation. The handoff is a logical place to catch the blackmailer. When he takes the money, we will strike and capture him. But we must not make him suspicious." "But won't he be suspecting an ambush?" I worried. Holmes nodded. "Of course he will," he confirmed. "That's why he is planning to take certain countermeasures. Therefore, we must be smarter and quicker than the blackmailer." Marley was skeptical. "I'm not sure I like the plan," he stated. "Are we using real money? My money? We must, Holmes replied. We can't arrest someone for taking a sack of paper shreds, and we have nothing to go on except the handoff itself. Now I'm certain I don't like the plan, Marley continued, but I understand that it must be so. Good, said Holmes. Now let's talk specifics. What can we infer from the location? Why would he choose a church? A public space and popular destination during the Christmas season, I mused. Did you know, Marley remarked, that St. Mary on the corner of Bloomfield Street and Finsbury Circus is the City of London's only Catholic church? Holmes tapped his temple. Why, of course, he mumbled. Anglican churches wouldn't have any nativity scenes. St. Mary Moorfields was not far from Marley's office. Once our client removed the money from his safe and put it into the jute sack as instructed, the three of us walked over to the church. It had begun to snow. A white Christmas was before us. We treaded along a flurry of increasingly larger and thicker snowflakes, slowly dancing to the ground. How beautiful, I remarked. Humbug, Marley contradicted. Those were the only words that were exchanged until we arrived at the church. Holmes was the first to walk through the large church door and down the centre aisle to the altar. There to the left stood the nativity scene hailing the newborn king. Life-sized kneeling figurines of Mary and Joseph flanked the hay-filled manger cradling baby Jesus. They were surrounded by the three kings, Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar, bearing gifts, and the Star of Bethlehem hung resplendently above it all. This version omitted the donkey and the ox. All in all, it was a striking display. The figurines seemed impressively lifelike. Holmes stayed on course. He took the sack of money from Marley and, as instructed, laid it underneath the Saviour between the cross base of his improvised bed. Then we sat down on a centre pew and waited for the blackmailer to appear. Holmes and Marley kept their gazes fixed on the entrance. They believed they would recognize the culprit as soon as he walked through the door. Their eyes tracked everyone who entered, but it was never the one. Meanwhile, I was still admiring the nativity scene, which must have been made by the hand of a great artist in the Neapolitan style. The clothes on the figure blew in the soft wind, the eyes glowed in the candlelight, and the Virgin Mary even began to move. She tipped over the manger, expelling the Son of God, grabbed the sack of money, and ran towards the sacristy. The nativity figurine was alive. Holmes missed the spectacle as he still had his head turned toward the main entrance, expecting the blackmailer to walk through the door. I poked him in the ribs with my elbow. "Holmes!" I cried. "Did you see that?" Holmes looked at me with a blank expression, as if I had just awoken him from a dream. What's the matter, Watson?" he stammered. "We were duped!" I exclaimed. I jumped to my feet and pointed at the now incomplete nativity scene. "There! The Virgin Mary is our spirit! She made off with the money!" "The Virgin Mary?" Holmes repeated. "Watson, what are you talking about?" "Don't you understand?" I asked, agitated. "The Virgin Mary wasn't a figurine, she was a real person disguised as the Mother of God. She must have stood there motionless for hours, fooling us and everyone else." When he finally caught on, Holmes's face broke out in a smile. "That is remarkable," he concluded with patent admiration. Now Marley poked Holmes in the ribs from the other side. "Mr. Holmes," he cried, "save your admiration of the theatrical performance for later. I don't even know what I'm paying you for, but may I propose you initiate a chase?" "A good proposition," Holmes agreed and slapped me on the back. "Go, Watson, run." I set off immediately. I climbed out of the pews, sprinted down the aisle past the toppled nativity scene, and out the back door. Holmes remained at my heels. Marley stayed behind. All I heard was him cry, "Save my money!" Then he sat back down, folded his hands, and began to pray. Behind the door I collided with a priest who was preparing for Mass. "Did the Virgin Mary come this way?" Holmes asked the perplexed man. The cleric hesitated and stuttered, I believe so." "Where did she go?" Holmes continued. Upstairs," the priest answered, raising his eyes and pointing up to heaven or the ceiling. Holmes correctly interpreted the priest's Marian apparition and concluded, "The bell tower, Watson! She's in the bell tower!" We ran further down the corridor and soon found the winding staircase. Holmes hurried up the stairs, but there was no need to rush. Our spirit was trapped. When we arrived at the belfry, the blackmailer in the Mary costume, who we'd now presumed to be female, turned her hooded head away from us. Even so, Holmes identified her and called her name. "The game is over, Mrs. Cratchit." "Mrs. Cratchit?" I asked, surprised. "How can it be?" The Virgin Mary, who was still clambering onto the sack of money with one hand, turned to us, pulled back her hood, and confirmed Holmes's accusation. "Congratulations, Mr. Holmes," she said. "How did you know?" "Despite of your grand theatrical performance," Holmes explained, "there were several clues that pointed towards you. Your poor spelling, your relationship to Marley's dogs, your Catholic background. They were just clues, but I've been certain that you were behind the Christmas spirit ever since we visited your husband." "And when were you going to inform me?" I asked, a trifle incensed. "My dear Watson," Holmes instructed, "I told you to focus on the clues and not to become distracted. That's what sets a good detective apart." "A good detective?" I repeated, raising my voice. "And what am I, Father Christmas?" Mrs. Cratchit interrupted our little thought experiment. "Stop it," she ordered. "It isn't over yet." She walked to the wooden wing door that led outside and pushed it open. The abyss lay before her. There was no way she could survive a fall. "Mrs. Cratchit," I cried, "don't do it." But she took a step towards the open arch and lifted one foot into the air in an almost teasing way. It seemed she was about to jump at any moment. "Please, Mrs. Cratchit," I begged. "It's no solution." "I don't agree," she countered. "Do you believe in the immortality of the soul, Dr. Watson? The kingdom of heaven belongs to the poor, doesn't it?" I hesitated. I believe, I finally said, that every human soul has a responsibility in this world. You are responsible for your family. You cannot abandon them." "I'm aware of that," Mrs. Cratchit answered, and began to laugh. Then she opened the sack, turned it upside down, and shook it, releasing the money into the air. Hundreds of banknotes danced in the wind like giant snowflakes and slowly fell to the ground on Finsbury Circus. The first passer-by noticed the spectacle. "A miracle! It's snowing money!" one of them called as he tried to pick bills out of the air. Others peeled the money off the snowy street. People came running. Street children flocked in, homeless people, labourers and employees, while the upper crust just turned up their noses. Within a few minutes, £10,000 had been distributed among the people, redistributed from the pocket of a man who loans out money to the pockets of those less fortunate. It was actually £9,000. Mrs. Cratchit kept a bundle of £1,000 in her hand. When Holmes spotted it, he said, "We must return Mr. Marley's property." He then took the bundle out of her hand, plucked out a £10 note, and handed the rest back to Mrs. Cratchit with the words, "That'll do. And now, Mrs. Cratchit, I recommend you exit through the rear. Merry Christmas." In the meantime, Marley had unsuccessfully tried to stop the crowd from collecting his money off the street. When we handed him the single £10 note we had seized, the exasperation was written all over his face. "And the perpetrator? What happened to him?" he asked. "I'm sorry, Mr. Marley," Holmes explained. "Unfortunately, the chap got away in the belfry. But we can provide a precise description of him to Scotland Yard. An elderly man, overweight, white hair and a long beard, red clothing trimmed with white fur, and a Scandinavian accent. I am sure the police will find him soon. He is not an actual spirit after all." 6 days later, on the 4th Sunday of Advent, a messenger delivered a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit. They thanked us for everything and apologized for the inconveniences. They also disclosed the location of the 2 dogs. Mrs. Cratchit had sent them to her Irish uncle's farm to provide the large Great Danes a better life in the countryside. "This case," I said to Holmes, "will forever remain a stain on your impeccable record. The perpetrator, the money, the dogs, they're all gone. You've rarely had such poor press. Do you really intend to weigh a professional record against human lives?" asked Holmes. "That isn't like you." "With all due respect," I contradicted, "it isn't like me, but it is like you." "My dear Watson," Holmes began with visible enjoyment, "a wise man recently told me that every human soul has a responsibility on this earth. My responsibility may be to solve criminal cases, but no one can oblige me to share the results of my investigations with the world." "I understand," I answered, "and a good friend of mine recently told me that there is always room to exercise personal morals within criminal investigations. I'm pleased that we could put this into practice and confirm its applicability so soon." "Well," Holmes said as he poured us both a glass of cognac, "then we agree. To a Merry Christmas. May we remain unemployed for the next several days." "Don't take this the wrong way, Holmes," I contradicted as I raised my glass. "But may we remain unemployed for the next 12 months. To a happy new year."